We know him out west. Remember that name. Smart dude.
One of the most talented people I know because he does it all. He's a quarterback guru, a filmmaker, an on-air personality.
Yogi Roth, Big Ten Network. He knows college football as well as anybody.
All right, we are back for another episode of Under the Number. Today, we've got Yogi Roth. Yogi has played, coached, written about, now broadcasted football. You can catch him on the Big Ten Network now. Formerly, he was at the Pac-12 Network. He's been involved with Elite 11, as you can see by the hoodie he's got on. He was an assistant at USC back in the day. He was a walk-on turned scholarship guy at Pitt. So, talking to a true football guy here, and really fired up to welcome my friend Yogi to the show.
Hey man, it is awesome to be here. I love how we randomly connected after we purposely connected when you were like a young pup spinning it at Elite 11. And now all the stuff you're doing with your newsletter and your company and this podcast and your support on ours with Y Option has been immense. So really grateful for the time here today, man.
Yeah, and we'll definitely talk Y Option. I'm so happy to be a small part of that. It's been very cool to see it get off the ground in the last year. And obviously there's been tons of changes in your life recently. I want to open with kind of tying into what I mentioned at the start. You are a football guy through and through. I mean, we talk about, you got the book behind you, 5-star QB, you've coached, you've played, you're now the broadcaster. Why do you love college football?
Yeah, there's a ton of layers there. I think to just get back to simplicity of what I get to do every Saturday, which is stand at the 50 and one of 2 or 3 people in the whole stadium that has a headset on. And I just get back to like, it's the ultimate team sport in all sport. I believe in that. And while it's becoming so individualized, the best teams only win when they become, as Pete Carroll used to say, one heartbeat. And I love that about it, man. I love the lessons that it teaches, whether it's my son who just turned 10 today, or whether it's me in my almost mid 40s now. Like, it keeps teaching. So I think that's why I love it. It just continues to impact different cycles of all of our lives, right? We're rabid on Saturday, we're depressed on Sunday, we're hopeful in the springtime, and then we learn the lessons as we play. And I just try to be a light in that regard and shine one and illuminate this grand sport that we love. Like I consider myself a guardian of the game, and I love the game for so many powerful reasons. But I think the first one is team. I really think there's something beautiful to that element of football. And then I think it's my job every Saturday to celebrate the game and then go coach the viewer.
You grew up in Pennsylvania, obviously played high school ball out there, and ended up walking on at Pitt. You have a legendary teammate, one in particular, in Larry Fitzgerald.
Yeah, Larry and I did our I guess my final 2 years. He only had 2 at Pitt because he did a year at a prep school. So he did 3 years post high school, and then he entered the draft. It's kind of interesting. Like, I think the coaching staff, they kind of looked at me as the bridge between them and some of the best players. So my first 2 years, I would room at every game with a guy named Antonio Bryant. And if those who are watching or listening, look him up. He was one of the greatest receivers I've ever seen. I still think he's the best receiver my eyes have ever seen, the most talented receiver. Jeremiah Smith might surpass that. We'll see what he does in his second campaign at Ohio State. But Antonio was him. He won the Blitnikoff, was an All-American, just a dynamic player, spoke multiple languages, but also rolled to the beat of his own drum. And I think I was so straight and narrow, like they saw coach in me before I even thought about the idea of potentially coaching. So I was the guy that just made sure Antonio came to the meetings, and so I did 2 years with him, and then I'm thinking, all right, now it's my turn, right? I'm on the video game back in the day. You're like the 4th receiver, 3rd receiver, and I ended up, as you referenced, I walked down, but I played as a freshman, started as a sophomore, and then you think it's your time, and then here comes this guy named Larry Fitz in. And the staff did the same thing. They were basically like, train him to take your job. Like, you have your job for maybe 3 days, which is basically what I had in training camp. And it was really apparent that he was just going to be elite. And once he learned it and began to process it, he would only play even faster. And by the time I think it was week 2, we played Texas A&M, and he might have had 2 or 3 touchdowns. And it was like, okay, Yogi, go back to that 4th receiver, 5th receiver, and just teach everybody, help everybody. And I learned that there's a role for that.
And so, I mean, you kind of hinted at it there, being a coach on the field. You said you didn't even consider going into coaching. You didn't think of yourself that way. You were obviously trying to get your own PT. But at what point did you maybe have a little light bulb go off and think, okay, maybe there's something here for me longer term in the coaching or at least analysis world?
Well, I became obsessed with the craft really early on. I never played organized tackle football till 8th grade, but I was playing football forever. I was studying the Niners. I can give you their entire starting lineup from like the 80s. Like I loved teams that threw the rock, quarterbacks in the NFL, wideouts that would make plays. I was that guy in the playground growing up. I was the fastest guy. The guy just, hey, throw it up and I'll run by everybody and catch it. Then he started doing it with pads on, and then he recognized that it could lead to college. I can remember first school I talked to, I think was Princeton, like some Ivy Leagues, because my grades were pretty good. And then I just saw the big stage of 50, 60, 80,000 people. And I just said to myself on a Thursday night, I can remember it in high school being like, I can't not try to play at the highest level. It was Syracuse and Va Tech, and there was like 80, 90,000 fans watching the game. And I was like, I can't not try. So I had to go try, and I went and tried, and luckily had a little bit of success. But the only reason I think I had success was work ethic and acumen. I mean, I knew every position by the start of my freshman season inside and out. My sophomore season, I was like, I'm going to know every hot route, every pass protection. And then my junior and senior seasons, I actually started sitting in the quarterback room. So I was like, I want to know how they think. So I was doing all of the coaching things. Like, what do I like after studying a film of a team on a Sunday and tell it to our offensive coordinator? Like, I was doing all those things. And the coaches would always say it, and I'm sure they said it to you too. It was like this line that I never really enjoyed, but I get why coaches say it. Like they'd say, well, one day we'll be working for you, or one day when you're coaching. And I was like, what about my pro day? Like, what about, to your point, like, what about my opportunity, like to be a version of Wayne Corbett, for instance, back in the day, was the guy that was like the modern day Wes Welker, if you will, or guys like that, or River Craycraft, who I know you're familiar with. Anyway, they used to always say it. And then when I finished playing, I never even thought of the NFL. And that's the only regret I have in my playing career. And now as a coach, whether it's Elite 11 or as a broadcaster, I believe my responsibility is to coach the viewer. Whenever I talk to a young athlete, I only want to breathe life into the potential of their dreams. And sometimes it's really scary to say what we want most. And I was really scared to say that I wanted that. And our coaches, I felt like put a cap on my career, because they were like, well, yeah, he's just going to do great things. He had all these internships. He was in the media. He could go coach, like blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh, it just stifled my confidence of chasing what mattered most to me at the time. And I say that because then the next natural step was coaching. And I can remember a guy named J.D. Brookhart, who left Pitt my senior year to become the head coach at Akron, and he offered me a job coaching. He offered me everything. He offered me job coaching, offered me a job DFO, director of football operations, offered me a job broadcasting, a combination of all three. And I can remember being 22 and had just moved to Australia, came on back, was traveling all over the country, just living out my 20s, I guess you could say, my early 20s. And something in my gut was just like, you don't want to go live that life. Because I saw my coaches sleeping in the office. I saw my coaches never seeing their family except on a Thursday night. Like, I just was like, who would ever want to do that? Well, cut to a year later, and I get a phone call from Pete Carroll in the middle of the night after they just beat Oklahoma to win a second national title. And he goes, hey, what do you think about coming out? And I said, Pete, I love you. I don't want to coach, though. And he goes, no problem. Come on, do recruiting, get your master's degree. We just want you around the program. And within 2 weeks, Brent, he sat me down on I could see it now, like this nasty old couch over breakfast burrito. And he said, hey, what do you think about coaching? And it was a no-brainer, because I had been doing it forever. I'd always been a coach. I love to coach. That's my personality, is one of my is that of a coach. And I just stopped fighting it for the first time ever. And then to do it with a legend like Pete and learn from him and Sark and Lane Kiffin and Kenny Norton and like all the guys. It was, at the time, I was getting a master class in what coaching actually is.
You mentioned, I want to jump right back to the USC chapter in just a second, but you mentioned that your, I guess, style, maybe as a player, one was probably hyper-focused, very dialed in, understanding all the X's and O's, and like you mentioned, getting the other players to get to meetings on time and very by the book. Is there any, years on, in retrospect, do you have any things that you regret about the way that you approach the game as a player?
Oh, yeah. I say it pretty regularly. I had lost the joy because I was so intense. And like personal, like, in your room, looking at yourself face to face, like I had made it such an intense endeavor. I mean, I was catching thousands of balls after practice. I was working out at 2:30, 3 in the morning running routes, and then again at 6 a.m. Like, it was just obsessive to go play. Once I had earned a scholarship, like I was just like, I just got to keep going. And I think I know I lost the joy in the craft. And now when I talk to locker rooms, I've coined this phrase, I utilize this phrase, I should probably say. I call it the wonder switch. There's an author named Harris III who wrote a book about wonderment, and he called it the wonder switch. And I just fell in love with this. And my point is that when we walk into stadiums, you walked into Stanford, I walked into Pitt Stadium the night they played Notre Dame in the final game at Pitt Stadium, and I had this wonderment. Like, you can still have it now. You walk into a stadium, you're like, damn, I could see you. You start to see it, you start to feel it, and then your imagination kicks in. And wonderment and imagination, I believe, are tied together. So you wonder, what would it be like? And then you imagine yourself, I see myself making plays here. And it's just such a positive experience. And then at some point, I say that wonder switch gets turned off. And mine was turned off by myself. Mine was turned off on proving people wrong. Mine was turned off by, I don't think, coaches necessarily breathing life into my dreams. I mean, my coach every year, and I've called him out on this to his face, where he used to say to me, this was our coordinator at the time, JD Brookhart, he'd say, Yogi, my goal is that you don't play. But we both know that you're going to. And his point was like a backhanded compliment in his lens. He was like, no, like, you were always going to find your way on the field, but we always wanted to out recruit like the 5'11", 4'5", 4'6" wide receiver with premier wideouts, which I understood. But to me, it was like the ultimate, like, just stacking up chips on my shoulder to prove him wrong. And it ended up being really unhealthy. Like, I would go out to practice and it was all about, like, it was so businessy. Like, I think I would smile outwardly, but inwardly, it was such a grind. I mean, I was just insanely obsessive. Like, I knew the offense better than probably anybody in the program, and I would be up every night just writing every single play down again and again and again and again and again until 2, 3 in the morning, and then you'd be exhausted by the game. You know, if I got one wrong, I would beat myself up over it. So I think athletes, to put a bow on it for a soundbite, athletes are horrible at self-compassion. Men are traditionally horrible at self-compassion. I firmly believe I fall into that category. My therapist has shined a light on that for me, and I'm like, it's a great point. Like, very rarely did I ever say nice route, let alone nice season, nice practice, nice job. And it's something I'm trying to really put into my even daily practice now, because as a broadcaster, like, your job is to, you know, say what's happening in real time. You could prep all day long, but you really are reacting and then looking forward. Your prep allows you to look forward, but reacting allows you to add context to that. So I'm so grateful that I'm no longer in that state that I was as a player, because I really lost a lot of the joy. And I think being around Pete Carroll in my 20s just reminded me how much fun it is, and how much work you do, and how competitive it is, but how much fun it is. And Pete never missed on the fun. And he made sure that, you know, the lowest coach on the staff, which was me when I started, to the highest, maximize that. And I think that's probably the biggest takeaway I had from my time with him.
And so you talk about wonderment. That was peak USC, at least for my lifetime. I mean, I truly cannot imagine running into that stadium with Reggie Bush and Leinart and Dwayne Jarrett and all these guys from that era. The team was just on top of the world. I mean, later on, I know you overlap with Sanchez and John David Booty and like guys who were just, the program was firing, and the atmosphere must have been so unbelievable. No shortage of fun. How did the coaches navigate? Because like you say, everyone knows Pete Carroll is like juice guy. He's fun. He's all about it. But at the same time, you have to be a little bit delicate when you're dealing with 18 to 22-year-olds. How did that balance get achieved, and how was it maybe communicated from the coaching staff? The combination of you're recruiting the kid, hey, this is going to be the most fun you've ever had. This is pure electricity and great football. Balancing with, once the kid's on the program, like, we need you to stay eligible, not get in trouble. We need to actually, get places on time. How did that get communicated?
Yeah, well, Pete, if you go back into his story, and I was grateful to co-author his book, which was a New York Times bestseller titled Win Forever. And when he was fired at the Patriots, it was his second NFL head coaching job. He had success everywhere he had been, but he had been coaching at the time for probably 25, 30 years and never taken a break. And he's fired and he's out, and it hits him that like he might never get a full-time job. And if he does, as a head coach, and if he does, he's not going to get 3 or 4 years. He'd be lucky to get, 18 months, right? That's just the way that coaching works. So he went to work on his philosophy, and a moment really struck a chord with him, which he was reading one of John Wooden's book. It's the Blue Book, if everybody's familiar with that. And it said how it took him, I think, 12 or 13 years to win his first national title. And then he basically never lost again. And Pete was like, oh, he had it figured out. So he went to town on like what mattered most for him. what he found clarity on, what he was most confident in, and then how to be disciplined around that. He would call it his style, his vision, his theme, and his philosophy. We write in detail about that in the book. What does he want practice to look like? How is he going to communicate with his players? And it was this modality of like, he was forced to take a break to assess. I'd say this to coaches who either get fired or step away of, don't go run around the country and go visit all your boys and then just get back into the cycle. But can you really take stock? And some of the best companies, as you know, being in the business world, like force after a decade their employees to take a 6-month sabbatical. I couldn't be more of a champion for something like that. This was forced for him. So how did he do it? Well, I wrote my master's thesis at SC about this, which is the best coaches, Pete, John Wooden, Coach K, Phil Jackson, you name it. I believe there's 2 commonalities. One is they are dramatically consistent in thought, uncommonly consistent. And then they are independent in that thought. So they're not trying to be one another. They have their way and their lens in which they look at life, but they are insanely consistent. I think the people that have worked for Pete Carroll, from USC to Seattle now with the Raiders in Vegas, they would say he's uncommonly consistent. So what did that look like to players? Well, if we were recruiting a young 18, 17-year-old Brent, we would say, okay, hey, man, we got 3 to 5 elite quarterbacks in the room. They've all been elite prospects coming out of high school, just like yourself. And what we told them was on day 1, they're going to run with the ones. And everything here is based on a relentless pursuit of a competitive edge. And if you're the better player, you're going to play. And then we would go back and tell them, hey, Brent's coming in. We told them the same thing we told you. So much so on signing day every year, when signing day actually mattered and was a thing, we would bring the whole team into the team room and we would show, 45 to 60 seconds of highlights per player. Hey, he's coming to get your job at linebacker, Thomas Williams. This is Ray Malunga. This is Brian Cushing. We told him the same thing we told you. He's going to get a shot day 1. And then day 1, we'd give him the shot. Like, I could see Mark Sanchez supplanting Matt Leinart day 1 in 11 on 11 against the Brian Cushings, Terrell Thomas, like just like the ridiculous Dallas Sarts, like the insane defenses we had back then. And you can imagine, like, you're getting sacked, the ball's late, like you're proving that you're not ready. And we always felt, and Pete always felt, like you were going to earn the right to go play, and you're going to prove that you were ready. You're going to prove that you weren't. Like, there was going to be no guessing. So we put guys in that competitive cauldron all the time. And I think that's what allowed practice to be so special, because you earned it every day. And Saturday would be dependent on Tuesday and Wednesday and so on and so forth. Like, it was a beautiful crescendo, and it made practice intentional. It made it fun, because competing was fun. Like, it was the Latin root of the word of striving together versus the traditional definition of competing, which is striving against. And the guys bought in. And if you didn't, it really wasn't for you, and you got weeded out pretty quick. And the beautiful thing about doing that in LA, as you know, and I think SC's doing it now, is you can get some really special players there. And once you have some depth at a position, you are not feeling comfortable about your role anymore, and you're getting pushed to tap into your potential. And you got to answer the question. And that's what made, I think, every day, even for a coach, dude, like, you never rolled out there and put your hat on backwards, like, all right, one-on-ones, or pat and go. Like, no, dude. Like, that's the quickest way to get fired. Like, it came out with purpose. So it was awesome, man. I try to even, like, use those elements in my flag league with our 10-year-old. Like, it was really a beautiful time in my life. And then to visit Pete in Seattle or recently in Vegas, and talk to him about how he's setting that up. The principles don't change over the course of time, which has been really cool, because he had it nailed.
Is shining through a lot in this conversation, and I've picked up on it, having gotten to know you over the last year or so. You're such a deeply thoughtful person. I think about, people's psychology and, like, the why behind the things that you see on the field, the things that you see on film, and what is driving the actual individual athlete. And it shows in your books and all these things. You just mentioned that commonality, that common thread shared by elite coaches like Wooden and Pete Carroll and Coach K. Transitioning to your time at Elite 11, you saw hundreds of quarterbacks, thousands through the regionals and beyond. But it's very interesting. I think the Elite 11 is, particularly in its prime, was such an interesting, almost experiment, where you had this reality show kind of pressure cooker of the biggest alpha male, highest recruits, bring them all out for however many days and just have them go at it, like peak competition, peak spotlight. And yet there are lots of quarterbacks from Elite 11 who barely ever played in college, if at all. Nothing really worked out for them. The other end of the spectrum, you have future Hall of Famers. Matt Stafford was an Elite 11 alum. For the people who did find success, who you were able to sit there and probably at some level psychoanalyze when they were only 17 years old, would you say that there is a common thread with those who achieve success? What did you see that they had in common?
Yeah, it's a cool question. It's what we wrote about in Five Star QB. The impetus of that book was I'd been doing Elite 11 for maybe 15 years, and we kept getting asked the same questions by players and parents. And myself and the co-author Joey Roberts were like, we got to give them a book where there can be a tribe of mentors to guide this next generation. And it hit me. It was July 1, 2021, I guess, 2022, whatever the day NIL started. And I walked into a cafe at the hotel where Elite 11 was being held, and one of our counselors was there, Spencer Rattler, who's currently in the NFL with the Saints, I believe. And I looked at him and I go, hey, you good, man? Because he was with like an adult that I didn't recognize, or excuse me, I did recognize, but I knew it wasn't his family. It was an agent. And he goes, yeah, I'm good, man. I just launched my t-shirt line, my clothing line, and signed my NIL deal. Because it was the first day that NIL was legal.
Yeah.
And it was like, we're in a totally different world. Like, I'm in a coffee shop, and it's cool that Spencer Rattler and an agent just signed a deal together, which I love. Like, I'm a huge NIL supporter of the premise behind all of it. But to your point on the book, like, yeah, there are red threads. And as we did the research and interviewed over 50 five-star quarterbacks and over 50 what we call ambassadors, so head coaches like David Shaw or Pete Carroll or Chip Kelly or Lincoln Riley or Ryan Day or Dan Lanning. I mean, it's loaded with coaches, the book. It really confirmed what I think I learned over my time at the Elite 11, which is to get in the room, you have to be an elite competitor. It's not always true. Some guys shy from that. You reference like the alphas being around each other. You can sense really quickly. And I don't mean like I stick my chest out and talk smack. It's just, can I take up some space? Like, or do I shrink in the environment? And if I shrink, and when I'm talked to about it, am I able to accept some tools to grow? I think it's ridiculous when I hear coaches say, prominent coaches say, I need my quarterback to be an alpha and the loud guy. Like, then you've never been around Jalen Daniels. Not that guy. He was just the rookie of the year, I believe, in the NFL. Like,
Yep.
There's different personality traits. I don't have anything like that. To me, number one, though, you have to be an elite competitor. You have to be able to tap into that reservoir and find it when you need it. Two, and this one is like seems simple, but it's kind of a shocker to some, is you have to be accurate. And I've only seen in my 25 years now in major college football, one quarterback go from inaccurate to accurate. Josh Allen. Like he changed his motion. Like most guys don't do that. Like Aaron Rodgers went from high elbow to low elbow. He was always dramatically accurate from college to the NFL. Maybe there's others, but from what my eye has seen, I've never seen anybody do it. So you have to be accurate. And then you have to find context. So I can see a high school quarterback who's at 50% completion percentage, 56% completion percentage. I got to know context of his team. Like how many are drops, how many are misses, right? Is he just throwing it right through the hands of receivers that look like you and me? Or is he airmailing everything? Like that's two.
Yep.
And I think those two things really get you into the door. And I would say of the 140 some Elite 11 quarterbacks who made it to the finals in its 26-year history now, I'd say 90% of them do both of those two things. Elite competitors and are accurate passers. Every other year there's a kid who you're like, doesn't want to compete, and now he's probably in his third or fourth school and hasn't played. Like that doesn't happen that often. But then the third one is really the one where all the research went into, which is you have to be what we would coin a seeker. Like the best, I think, in any industry, but at this position, you have to be a seeker. What does that mean? That means you have to be willing to unearth and what we coin do the lonely work around the craft. Are you willing to do the boring things longer? Not longer than anyone else, just longer, right? Are you able to write in your notebook, day one install, time and time and time and time again? And on slant arrow, how you're reading the flat defender. Like, are you able to ask even more questions, whether it's standing with me on the sideline? There's a great story of a young man, Colton Yankoff, who went to UW as a quarterback, was like a 4 or 5 star quarterback coming out of Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, came to Elite 11 and was hurt. And I challenged him. I said, I want you to meet every member of the staff and ask them 2 to 4 questions. And every single day, he knocked out 5 to 7 coaches. And over the course of the week, he had like 20 pages of notes. He ended up transferring to UCLA as a quarterback, ended up playing tight end, running back, a special teamer, and he just finished his first year in the NFL with the Commanders. Never played a snap in college football quarterback, like other than like a couple Wildcat, which don't really count. Was never a premier player, but insane competitor. Okay, wasn't accurate, so no longer a quarterback, but he was an insane seeker. So I just go to that. Like Roshan Johnson, same deal. Went to Texas as a quarterback, never really played quarterback, but look at what he's done now in the NFL as a running back. Like I just think those traits don't change. So the seeker is the one that I wrote a ton about with Joey in the book, and I still believe it now. Like if I'm around elite high school quarterbacks, and they're not asking any questions, my red flag goes up, and then I prompt them on it, and then I study. How are they asking? Because they might ask in a different way. They might text you. They might whisper on the side. They might ask in front of the group. But if you're not trying to unearth around the most challenging position, as you know, in the world of sport, I don't think you have a shot. I really think you'll just get passed up so quickly, so efficiently, because knowledge is power at that sport. Jared Goff would always say, like, I can't do what some guys do with their legs, but very few can do what I can do with my mind. And you know, you're shaking your head, like, same deal. Andrew Luck. I mean, how many guys were you around at Stanford? Same deal, dude. It's why that offense was so successful in the era that it was.
And it's really a great part of the 5-Star QB book is it's so, you talk to 50 plus guys, like you said, and they were so reflective. I mean, some of them hadn't played ball for 15 years or longer. I mean, you were going back to people who were 5-star recruits in the early 2000s. But part of why I initially reached out to you is I was just realizing what a colossal research project that effectively was in order to gather that data to then put it into the form of a book, which I know took place via hundreds of conversations across 50 plus guys. What was the single most impactful conversation you had with any of these former 5-star QBs who are looking back on their time?
I'll put them into 3 different buckets, and so many just keep popping up. Like, I think of an unnamed huge recruit, and I won't say his name because in our conversation, he said to me, I can't go there. I buried it so deep, I can't go there. And that's when I knew he had something.
Yeah.
And this is a guy I'd known for a long time. Another recruit says, yeah, I'm not going to say his name. He's like, yeah, I'll do it. Yeah, I'll write it. Yeah, I'll be a part of the book. And he calls me one day and was very emotional and said, Yogi, I'm so sick of other people telling my story. They don't have me right. And I can't do this book because I'm going to tell my story my own way. And I was like, go for it, man. Go for it. So those are like, that's its own bucket of players that were like, you just picked at a wound that I have not touched in a while. You know, like, we all have that, I think, as athletes. You have that, I have that. But some in this, at least the modern quarterback era, since 1999 when recruiting rankings began, I was part of that first recruiting ranking world. There's wounds there. So there's that bucket. The next bucket is the guys that went there. I think of Ryan Burns, a guy you know well.
Yeah.
I think
Shout out to
Ryan.
Burns. Love Burns.
That's right. Love Burns. Yeah. Ryan Perrilloux. Those 2 guys are a similar bucket. Ryan Burns, as beautiful of a quarterback prospect as I've ever seen. Looked like Andrew Luck. The ball came out of his arm like Andrew Luck. Like, you thought you were seeing a clone. And then, of course, he went to Stanford. Like, it was an easy comparison. And his career didn't go as he anticipated. But what he wrote in the book was so beautiful. And what he shared was Tavita Pritchard, who you know well, and David Shaw, they also could recognize what a challenge it was for him. And they went to him and opened the doors to finding modalities to navigate what was going on between his ears.
Yeah.
And I just will forever defend Tavita and David Shaw for that, and many other things, but that of recognizing that it's challenging when you get beat out, when you don't live up to other people's expectations, let alone your own. And for Ryan to share that was powerful. I think of Ryan Perrilloux. He was LeBron coming out of Louisiana. And he would say that the way that he paraphrased it to me, and I can remember I could see doing a video conference like this with him like it was yesterday. He goes, Yogi, I'm just sitting on the farm in Louisiana, and I get a call one day, and they say, hey, you're the best quarterback in America. And I think that's like the hilarity around rankings is like somebody's just slapping a label on you. And I know it's thoughtful, and the people that do rankings do that, but I still don't think now the people that do that are aware of what it does to a player when they tell him who he is.
Right.
Like, I think 24/7 has a 5-star for every position. I think that's insanely probably brilliant from a marketing standpoint and also very inappropriate because there's not 32 5-star players that are going to be first-round picks in 3 or 4 years from now. It just doesn't exist. It won't happen.
Right.
Like, the numbers bear it out. So I think there's a business to it. There's a popularity to it. But when Ryan referenced that, and then Ryan went to LSU, and I think it was Jamarcus Russell, he came behind, played a little bit early on, then got in trouble academically, ended up having to leave the school, and it felt like the world crumbled on him.
Yep.
You know, I mean, those stories are just so constant. So those are the ones that I think, really truly jump out to me. And then I think of the ones that like had all the things in place, like Mark Sanchez. Mark came from a premier high school, was coached by Bob Johnson, who used to run the Elite 11, came to USC, was in the competitive cauldron of Leinart, Booty, him. He had a family, tremendous support. We had an awesome staff around him. Like, it just always reminds me when I go back, and I have alert in my phone like once a week where it says call a former Elite 11 quarterback, a 5-star QB, just to touch base because, not a lot of them were playing anymore, right? Sam Darnold was a 3-star recruit who blew up at a NorCal Elite 11, and he just signed for $100 million. Same class, Josh Rosen was a premier tennis pro prodigy, turned quarterback, started his first game against Virginia and threw for almost 400 yards as a true freshman. And you're thinking, here's the next great one, gets drafted in the top 15, and now he's in business school at Penn.
Yep.
One guy just signed a $100 million contract. Like, it's so hard to predict. Like, it's where do you go in college? What's around you there? Like, I think Jake Rodriguez he was going to be the next Marcus Mariota. He probably shouldn't have gone there. He should have gone to a pro style offense like USC or UCLA. He went to the wrong place. Like, that to me is so much of it. And then the numbers just bear itself out. And now I think it's going to get even worse because the premier teams, are they going to recruit and develop? Are they going to, go get a proven guy? Is that proven guy a 5-star guy coming out? Was he a 3-star who developed? Like, the rankings model, if we write that book again in 20 years, it might be completely different than the data and the research that at least stood out to you when you read the book for the first time.
Yeah. No, and I think for anyone whose interest is piqued by this, you got to just check out the book because it's thick. I mean, it has a lot of stories covered. It has a lot of practical advice if you're a parent or a kid trying to get recruited. There is a legitimate manual type element to some of it, and then there's just this incredible storytelling woven in as well. I loved it. So the post coaching and fast forwarding a little bit, you found yourself at Pac-12 networks, and this is Elite 11 along the way and calling games with the Pac-12. Can you please give people a little flyover? And maybe this is too fresh because I know that it was really a bummer for you to have some of your colleagues end up having to figure it out. But maybe the 30,000 foot view, what was it like being at the Pac-12 network when one day to the next, that was it?
Yeah, I think when I look back on really the last, from 2000 to 2024, it was like hyper, fight or flight. My amygdala was just on fire, and I'd imagine my 200 colleagues were the same way because it was, COVID, furloughed. What are you going to do? Is there going to be a season? To then new commissioner, and every couple of months, it felt like we're about to sign this mega media rights deal. And I think all of us who signed up to do at least what I get to do every day, which is be an analyst in college football, none of us signed up to be like a media rights expert. And quickly you're reading every John Wilner or John Canzano article, and you're trying to just navigate it. And our commissioners were phenomenal to me, Larry Scott and George Kleofkoff, in terms of having an avenue and a phone line to them. Hey, what's really going on? How can I help? Support, spread a message. Where was it really net out? Like, it was cool in that regard. So thus, you're always hopeful. I believe at the core of optimism is resilience. I'm a very optimistic guy, as you've come to know. Thus, you have to be able to navigate challenging times. And we were doing that. And then August 4th happened, which was the morning you wake up and think that this mega deal with Apple is going to be signed, and maybe NBC or whatever it would be at the time. And it fell out. And Washington, Oregon followed suit with, USC and UCLA had kicked off a year prior. So it was a gut punch. The day I could see it, like it was yesterday, I was on the phone on these steps I'm staring out in my backyard, and I could see just calling every colleague I had. And then at 11:02 that night, I talked to Ashley Adamson, who's my dear friend from the Pac-12, now at the Big Ten Network at Fox, and we just talked it out. And I remember hanging up and just being in tears, being like, God, why am I so emotional? And I think it was just because you cared so much. The people were so great. You didn't anticipate it coming. And as time has gone on, I think it's easier to see that was probably coming down the pipe. Yeah. And maybe, everybody maybe everybody's in a better spot. Who knows? I think hindsight will provide that moving forward. But man, it was dramatically challenging. And, for whatever you believe in, spiritually, for the universe to take down a conference that was 108 years old or whatever it was at the time, you had to kind of accept it and be like, something bigger is at play here personally. Okay, cool. Let's make a pivot. And it birthed really cool opportunities. I adore calling games in the Big Ten now. I would have never said that, right? Think about Yogi, me saying that 5 years ago, 10 years ago. I wanted to be at the Pac. I would have signed a 20-year deal. I told my bosses that constantly. I would have signed a 10-year deal now. But it opened up this avenue for me to get to places like Nebraska and Ohio State and Michigan and Penn State, places I grew up. I grew up in Big Ten country. That's been really cool, just in the diversity of my career. And then launching what you know as to be yoption.com, which is really college football, but through my purview. And my purview has been on the West Coast for 20 years now. So I get to talk about Alabama from LA. I get to talk about Michigan from LA. I get to bring on those coaches to this show. I got Max Brosmer, the quarterback in Minnesota, coming on later this week. Todd Blackledge coming on, the longtime broadcaster, different coaches. So it actually opened up an opportunity that I would have never have thought I would have done. You know, I could have done my podcast and called Games of the Pac-12 forever, been perfectly happy. But now I'm in this whole other world that was a grind in its first year. But now that I got through it, I feel actually settled. And it's like, okay, let's go attack this new frontier. And it's opened up relationships, friendships, maintained, of course, the ones from the past, and gifted me things that I would have never even dreamt to be possible in 2020, let alone on April 4th when everything fell apart in 2023.
Yeah, that's y-option.com. Everyone should go and subscribe. It's very thoughtful in a media landscape that is far from thoughtful a lot of the time. You don't get you've talked about with me many times. It's not about the screaming takes. It's like, whether it's a newsletter format, a long form podcast, interview, whatever, it's thoughtful stuff. You don't really listen to it on autopilot. Like every time I listen to one of these podcasts, you kind of tune back in, you lean in, and you take something from it. So I'd highly recommend people subscribe to that, built on Substack, but y-option.com. Last question here. So obviously you're calling games for the Big Ten. We'll make this a 3-part question, but they can be very quick answers. Okay. 1, do you get nervous broadcasting for games? 2, what is the team that you think is maybe a sleeper in that conference who people should look out for in the 2025 season? And 3, who is the player who you think is going to sneak up on people in the Big Ten this year?
Okay, so I'll go in reverse. I'll go with the team. I think I'm going to pick Illinois. I think they're going to be like last year. Rutgers was a sexy team based on the schedule, based on who they had returning and the additions they had. I think Illinois, based on what they did, who Brett Bielema is, and Luke Altmaier. He's the quarterback that no one is going to talk about, and he's a guy that I think could lead them to a CFP berth. Legitimately. Like, I think he's really gifted. This guy went to Ole Miss out of high school, transferred to Illinois, is coming on back for another run at it here. I think this team has a toughness to them that you can't really see on tape. Like, I go back and watch them and it's like, how physical are they? Until you're down on the field and you see how physical that is, it's really hard. And that's why I think that they'll continue to, have success under Brett Bielema. And I think this season, I think they're built for it. I really do. So I go them as my team, my sleeper team. I think the quarterback or the player, I'm doing a study now at yoption.com, which we'll release early next week, pending whenever you release our conversation here, man. But on quarterbacks to look at for next year. And it's so dynamic when you're studying them. Like, it's easy to say Julian Sayin at Ohio State. Like, he was best quarterback in the country. Like, is he going to surprise people? It's hard to probably put him in that category. I look at like Damon Williams at Washington under Jed Fish. That position for him always plays really well. I'm so intrigued to get to Oregon to see Austin Novosad and Dante Moore, or Luke Moga, who emerges as the quarterback for the future. So the player, it's probably hard for me to really say today. I have guys that I want to see well. I want to see Abe Lucas just crush it, for USC. And Anthony Lucas. Abe Lucas is a left tackle for the Seahawks. Anthony Lucas is a D lineman for the Trojans who came out of A&M. Been at SC for a couple seasons, still doesn't have a sack, but looks like as beautiful of a D lineman as possible. I want him to play well. Eric Gentry, he'll probably be the most intriguing one if I had to pick somebody that I'm thinking about in the Big Ten, or Zane Durant out of Penn State, defensive lineman. I think he got a chance to be a top 10 pick next year in the draft. So those are probably my players. Then when it comes to getting nervous, it's a really fun question. I've leaned a lot into a guy named Dr. Michael Gervais, who's coming up on our podcast next month. You'll love to listen of him. He's a high-performance psychologist. And he introduced me to this phrase that we introduce to quarterbacks now, and I have stolen 100% from my life. Instead of when I feel those feelings, right, whether it's your stomach or you're moving your knee a lot, or you feel that jitteriness, or if you want to coin nervousness, I just tell myself, hey, dude, Yogi, you're switched on. And when I say that to myself, the nerves get eliminated. I get to go play. I don't look at walking into a booth with, oh my God, maybe 2.7 million people are going to watch the game today. Or when you have a big one, you can just feel more people watching it. I don't do that. I'm let's go, dude. When I call a game, I think I've sat for one game in my career and I was miserable. And the only reason I did was because my partner sat. And I thought that's what you're supposed to do. This was 2009, my first year broadcasting. I stand, I'm moving, I'm like punching my play-by-play partner throughout the broadcast, man. Like, so I just feel like I'm switched on. Like my pregame warm-ups, like if I was the player version of me, I'd be jumping up and down in the tunnel, like head bobbing, like let's get it on. I feel that same way when I walk into the booth. Now there's an ease to it now because I've done it for so long. I'm not scripting out what I'm going to say anymore. You have to trust you embody it. And I think that was the coolest challenge of the Big Ten is on Sunday, we'd find out our game. And on Monday, when I'd start my real true study, I'd be sitting there, man, and watching film in my little creative space here. And I'd say, I don't know shit. I don't know anything about these teams. Like, what are we? I'm so lost. Like, I'd have no confidence. And then Tuesday, get a little bit better. And Wednesday, I'd like text our producer, like, got him in the bag, bro. Meet me on a Zoom at 11. Let's watch these 30 clips. And that was so fun because I didn't know the history of, you know, Michael Oxley offensively. Like I know the history of Kyle Whittingham defensively at Utah, or Kenny Dillingham and Marcus Rowe at Arizona State. Like all these games, when I went to Indiana and Kurt Signetti and Mike Shanahan and Tino Sinceri, like I knew who they were, but I didn't know what they did. And I'm a big fan of knowing personalities because it helps you call games in critical downs and distances. So I was starting in my lens from ground zero. Calling a game, doing the craft, yeah, no problem. But doing it at the standard that I have always had, it took a ton. Like it was 4:30 a.m. here, 3 nights a week or 3 mornings a week, and I love that shit, man. Excuse my language. I loved it. Like, and I still do. So it was beautiful. And to your point on nervousness, no, I don't. Unless I'm not prepared, I feel switched on. Like really, I feel like my body is on. Like let's go. And as long as audio works, telestration works, like those are the times where you get nervous. And you're like, it sounds a little wonky in my ear. How are you hearing it at home? Those are the things that like the discipline around the craft comes into play, and experience lends itself to those moments. But when it comes to calling it, like I'll go call the Super Bowl or the Natty or the CFP right now, and I wouldn't change one thing about my process.
I love it. Sounds like you are certainly in the right profession.
Yeah, there we go.
Well, Yogi, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I hope we'll talk soon, and I hope everyone goes and subscribes. Yoption.com. Check it out. This is a seriously different approach to college football analysis. It's a great way to stay in tune over the off season. And then, of course, check out Yogi on the Big Ten Network with plenty of games this season coming up.
Let's go, baby. Thanks for having me, and congrats on all your success, man. You have been a dear part of what we've built at Y Option, and really thrilled to get into year 2. It's hard to believe. Like, I think we've done almost, 70 episodes and 150 newsletters, and without you DMing me on LinkedIn, hey, ever heard of Substack? I'm like, dude, I got a call with them tomorrow. And then you and I collided, and you've just been a great resource and friend, and really thankful for all the things that you've done for my life, man.
I'm fired up to be involved with it, and very thankful as well. Thanks again.
Cool. All right, peace.